Yesterday, a wizard entered New York with a case. A case full of magical creatures. And unfortunately, some have escaped.
Teeny, you brought Met home.
That's Mr. Scamander. He's lost something I'm going to help him find.
Hey everyone, and welcome to my review on the latest film set in Harry Potter universe, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Once again directed by David Yates, who has directed the last 4 Harry Potter films and has returned to bring this franchise back to life in style. So this film is a spin-off to the Harry Potter films, based off of a book written in the Harry Potter universe. However, there hasn't actually been a novel published of this story before. It's actually an original screenplay written by J.K. Rowling. I've got to be entirely honest, before this movie was actually released, I was very conflicted over whether this was the right direction to go with the franchise. One side of me really liked the idea of doing something really risky and original that takes a completely different approach, offering something different while still maintaining that magic that keeps this franchise so special. While the fanboy side of me preferred the idea of a film adaptation further exploring the lore of Harry Potter's storyline, with either a prequel showing a detailed look at the story of Voldemort, or doing a couple of films showing Harry Potter's son experiencing his years at Hogwarts. I at first couldn't see how this film could capture the magic of this incredibly interesting universe. However, after seeing this film myself, I've got to admit I was really happy with how they brought this franchise back to life. This film is a completely different take on the franchise, being set in the 1920s in America, 70 or so years before the events of the Harry Potter films even happened. So you don't even really need to watch those films to understand what's going on. However, there are a couple of small cameos and references for those of us who have watched those films. But don't worry if you haven't seen the Harry Potter films, because you'll still completely understand what's going on. You'll just think of a couple of scenes differently to the way everyone else will when they happen. I personally really loved this new take on the franchise. It's just so well crafted and captures that magic that this franchise has maintained throughout every adaptation incredibly well. The creatures shown throughout this film are just so magnificently unique and adorable. They all add such a great charm to the film that reminds me why I love this franchise so much. As a huge fan of the Harry Potter universe, I was grinning almost the entire way through this film, because it was just so great to see them capture the magic of this universe in a completely different spotlight. When they were introducing all these great creatures for the first time, I've got to admit there was a point where I actually teared up a little bit, simply because of how great of a job they were doing at bringing this franchise back as good as it originally was. It really took me by surprise, and I wasn't expecting it to be this great. Being set in a different time and a completely different location really benefited this film for a number of reasons. Mostly because it just succeeds in making it feel separate to Harry Potter, while still keeping those elements that you love about this universe. It gives you a completely different view on the wizarding community and what it's like in the US, while also introducing a completely new set of characters that we haven't really heard of before. But there's also the possibility that we could see the appearance of some of the older characters from the Harry Potter films. It turned out to be a really smart way to revive this franchise and get people interested and invested into this universe again. I really hope this film works out for WB financially, because they really deserve pulling this one off. They've done a magnificent job. Without spoiling anything, the basic plot of this film is actually quite simple. The main protagonist, Newt Scamander, accidentally unleashes a number of potentially dangerous creatures into the real world full of muggles, or in the case of this film, since it's set in America, they're called nomad people. And he has to try and capture them all before the word is spread out about all these mystical creatures roaming about New York. This basic plot works really well as a way to bring back the franchise. It's a nice and simple story that doesn't oversaturate itself with too many complicated story elements. Just like the first Harry Potter film, it spends most of its time introducing you to this magical universe and getting you attached to all these adorable creatures and characters. That's at least the case for the first 3/4 of the film. What I mean by this is it spends a small portion of time focusing on this really unnecessary story element designed solely to set up the next 4 films that they've already announced. I'm not saying it was a bad story by any means. It just didn't fit with the movie at all and just created this really unnecessary dark tone that doesn't mix well with the charmful and light-hearted tone of the film. I realize they want to make a bunch of sequels and that's completely fine with me. I just think they could have set up those sequels in a way that didn't interrupt the cheerful experience of this film. Hopefully they learn from their mistakes next time and have much less sequel bait and more standalone sequels that slowly set up the next film without it becoming painfully noticeable to the audience. That's really the only complaint I had about this film. Everything else was fantastic. Performance-wise, everyone did a great job at their role, especially Dan Fogler, who plays a nomad person who gets caught up in the incident of witnessing all these creatures escaping, and due to some story elements which I can't discuss due to spoilers, he gets to join this journey of capturing all these creatures. And he does a great job at adding plenty of comedic relief and basically playing the role of the audience. His character is actually really amusing. Eddie Redmayne also does a magnificent job as the protagonist, Newt. His character is really well developed and you can just tell he has a huge passion for looking after these creatures and protecting them, as he's not really too fond of muggles because they tend to misjudge these creatures and treat them unfairly. So whenever he's communicating with these muggles, you can kind of tell he just doesn't like being around them by the look of his facial expressions, and looking down whenever he talks to them. In general, around people, he's just very socially awkward, but whenever he's around creatures, his personality just lights up. I thought those character traits were really well done and made him in general a really interesting character. There's plenty of other awesome characters that I'm going to stay quiet about because they weren't shown much in the trailers. Also, if you haven't heard the news lately of a very popular actor playing a certain character that's going to play a big role in the next couple of installments, then one of those characters is really going to surprise you. Don't worry, I'm not going to spoil it for you guys who don't know what I'm talking about. That's all I'm going to say. If you want to hear my opinion on the actor portraying that particular character, just request a spoiler talk in the comments section and I'll post the video up next week. The pacing can be slow at points, however I found the pacing to be greatly beneficial to the film, since it resulted in a lot more time being spent focusing on the creatures and seeing all these magical locations in great detail, without it all being brushed past in order to further on the story. That's basically just designed to set up the sequel. However, the pacing will probably bother some people. I just personally didn't mind it at all, and I actually really liked the slow pace. The CGI looked surprisingly good. It never really bothered me at all and actually kind of benefited the film. Sure, it didn't look realistic at all, but I personally thought the visually dazzling scenes that they achieved with the CGI wouldn't have been possible at all with the use of practical effects, and it never really stood out to me, so I was personally completely fine with it. Overall, I absolutely adored this film. I was blown away by the fact that they actually achieved bringing the magic back that makes this franchise so great, while at the same time doing something completely different and original that separates it from the Harry Potter films. I personally couldn't be happier with how this film turned out and can't wait to see the next 4 installments. It's actually the most fun I've had at the theatre this year and is a serious contender for my top 10 list. Absolutely go see this film if it grabs your interest. It's definitely cinema worthy. I would even go as far to say that it's actually a must watch. That's it for my review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to see more reviews, I've got 2 new reviews I just recently posted on my blog for Hacksaw Ridge and Arrival. They're both fantastic films that I would highly recommend seeing if you have the money. Also, if you want to see that spoiler talk, just say so in the comments and I'll post it up next week. If not, then I'll just be back to working on the Blu-ray series I plan to set up. There should be a video up in the next couple of weeks discussing the format I plan to do for that review series, so keep an eye out for that. If you enjoyed this review or found it helpful in any way, please consider leaving a like, comment or subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.